everyone, thanks for coming back to my channel. Welcome. So we are full swing into the Halloween season. It is probably, by the time I'm posting this, late October, and because of that I have decided that we are going to go deep into King territory. That's right, we're going to be talking about not one but two books by Stephen King that I have read, and I'm very excited to bring them to you today. So book one is not gonna be a horror book. It's actually on writing by Stephen King. And if you're not familiar with this book, it is one part memoir, one part how-to on the craft of writing fiction. So let me just start by saying, I love me a good memoir. I really like memoirs. In fact, if I had to say like my favorite type of book to read, it's a memoir. But a very interesting memoir where King talks about basically how he got into writing, the events in his life that led up to him becoming a successful author, both in terms of getting things published early in his career, but also his financial success that he had when he sold Carrie. And so it's really interesting to hear about his journey. Second half of this book is all about the how-to craft of writing, and just even everything from basic sentences to paragraphs to how to make dialogue believable, how to edit. So that was really informative. I have to say, a lot of the things that he said I had kind of picked up on my own over the years by being both a reader and a writer, and from listening to people who were smarter than me give me advice on my own writing. So there wasn't a ton of new information in here for me as a writer, but I think where I found the most benefit wasn't necessarily as someone who wants to write, but as someone who wants to read more. He gets into the nuts and bolts of writing in a way that I didn't expect. It's not like a grammar lesson or anything. He spends a lot of time focusing on how the flow and the prose of your writing can either bring the reader into an experience or really put them off. And I thought that the critique he gave there was really insightful. And it's because of that I would actually recommend that every dyslexic person who wants to become a better reader should definitely give this book a try, whether you read it or you listen to it on audiobook, because he gets into kind of the nuts and bolts of how good fiction should be sort of crafted. And I think when you understand those different pieces, it can make you a more informed reader and help you pick out books that you might be more inclined and interested in reading just by doing a quick glance at things as simple as like how much white space there is on the page. Are there big paragraphs? Does the dialogue seem fake or phony as far as like, is that actually how people speak? And he does a really good job of succinctly explaining that in the second half of this book. Now, that may come as a surprise to some of you, because if you have read much Stephen King, you know that he can be very lengthy in his works. I mean, this, on first glance, does not seem succinct. I think Stephen King gets to the point he wants to make. He just has a lot of things to say. Why? Like, This is not a novel. This is a fucking yoga block. Like, you kill flying insects in your house with this. It's big, is what I'm saying. It's a big book. It's long. 1,000. Wait a second. What? How long is this? Okay, last page. 1,153 pages. 1,153 pages. Bitch! Who has time for this? How scared do I need to be? So anyway, yeah, I think everybody should check this out. It's a great memoir, really insightful, gives you some of the nuts and bolts of writing that I think, once you understand how something works, you're better able to evaluate it and pick it apart. So once you understand how good, prolific authors formulate their craft, you might be more empowered to pick out books that you like a little bit better. So I definitely recommend everybody checking this out. It's a good read. It's not a hard read. I enjoyed it a lot. In fact, I think of all the books that I've read in the past 2 months, this is one of my favorites. He says something really insightful here that I highlighted because I wanted it definitely spoke to my experience as a dyslexic reader, and what I look for and the types of things that I want to read. He writes, language does not always have to wear a tie and lace up shoes. The object of fiction isn't grammatical correctness, but to make the reader welcome and then tell a story. To make him or her forget, whenever possible, that he or she is reading a story at all. And if you can do that, ladies and gentlemen, if you can make someone, especially someone with dyslexia or another type of maybe learning disability or difference that makes reading challenging for them, if you can make them forget that they're reading and pull them into a story, I think that's what every writer wants to do. So thank you, Mr. King, for that. Now I will be talking about book 2 by Stephen King that I read this month. Unlike the monster that is it, both literally and figuratively, this is much more consumable, much more digestible. I'm talking about Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King. Look at that. It's so skinny. It needs a sandwich. Look at how skinny it is. Such a fast read. Oh, but wait. Pictures, you say? I get pictures in my books? But I thought it was only for graphic novels and children. No, you get pictures. Cycle of the Werewolf is a book that takes place in a small town in Maine. Big shocker. If you've read Stephen King, you know I think most of his books take place in Maine. There's a whole other world, Stephen. Whole world. There's life outside of Maine. But anyway, it takes place in a small town called Tarker's Mill. Tarker's Mill. I was cheating. I was reading it off the back. A small town called Tarker's Mill, and each month a new person is just horribly murdered, slaughtered by a werewolf, and throughout the year we start to get a little bit more insight. Becomes a little clearer about who this werewolf might be. So, good little cute short story. It says it's a novel. I don't believe that this makes a novel. But who am I to judge? That seems pretty skinny for a novel. But anyway, good little book, cute. So why did I read this? I read this because my husband told me that I should. Actually, that's not what he said at all. What he said was, hey Rachel, we do this podcast together where we both review things that the other one likes. What's a book you want me to read? And I said, bam, The Giver. I'm not holding it in my hand, but maybe somewhere around my head I will put a picture of The Giver. That was a book I liked when I was a kid, and on this podcast we discuss things that we both like and share them. And so I was like, what was a book you liked as a kid? And he said Stephen King, Cycle of the Werewolf. So we went out and bought a copy and I read it. And it was pretty enjoyable. But I think one thing that I really didn't like about it, to be honest, is that each chapter is a different month of the year. And each chapter, something else happens to another person who encounters the werewolf. And I felt like I got to know different characters, but then I didn't really get to know them because they weren't really fully developed. There is one character who meets the werewolf in the summer who goes on to be in the rest of the story. But I found I would read a chapter and I would start to get into who this person was, and then the werewolf would kill them. And then the next chapter, I would read about a person, I start to get into who they were, and then the werewolf killed them. And I was like, dude, can I just get one character who doesn't die immediately? Because I'm getting kind of bored about just reading on the monthly cycle how the werewolf kills a person. It's a little boring. And then, Stephen heard my calls through the vastness of time and space and said, don't worry, Rachel, I got you. And then in July, there was one character who didn't die who goes on to be in the rest of the story. So that was good. But I will say that first part where I was like, bro, why? I don't have anybody to hold on to that makes me want to read the next chapter. This werewolf, not that interesting as it turns out. He's just like a murder machine who eats people. Give me something. And then in, middle of the story, he finally throws me a bone, and I was a little more intrigued. But the first half, I was like, I don't care about this. I don't want to read it. I'm just reading it because I like my husband. That's not a good enough reason to keep reading a book, by the way. Just because someone said, oh, I really like this book, you should read it. If you're reading a book and you're 10 pages in, you're like, no, this is garbage, I'm not going to read it anymore, put it down. Go outside. Go for a bike ride. Go to the store. Play with a ball. Do anything else you want, because it is not worth your time to sit in a chair and read words on a page if you are not entertained. Just throw it away. I threw the book. I don't care. I'll throw a book across the room. I'll throw my camera across the room. I don't care. I do what I want. I'm a grown-up. Anyway, Cycle of the Werewolf. Did I like it? Yeah, it was okay. It was good. I'll talk about it more on that podcast, which I'll link to down below when it gets posted. But anyway, I hope that you are having a fantastic Halloween season, and please let me know in the comments below what you're reading. If you want to like and share and subscribe, those are all things you're free to do, and I hope that you do them. And just know that in my heart I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. So until I see you next time, go read a book.